Hello everyone, Darth here, and welcome back to another overly analytical video essay. As much as I was entertained by the completion of Season 1 of Loki, I was left with one disturbing thought. This show doesn't make sense. Which, as much as I love Marvel, is frustrating in its own right, but there's another reason I felt compelled to make this video. And that's because the ways that Loki failed are some of the exact same mistakes that we saw in the sequel trilogy. In fact, I can almost make a scene-by-scene, character-by-character comparison between the Loki show and the sequel trilogy. Let's explore what Marvel has been doing wrong, how that compares with what Lucasfilm did wrong, and how our reactions to these things can help shape the future of film. Now, if you're a serious comic nerd, you probably can explain away every issue that I'm about to complain about, citing backstory from decades of comics. But remember the point of these critiques. Films are complex. The audience can easily get the wrong message if the filmmakers aren't careful. The audience can just as easily be confused if they don't know simple backstory that the plot fails to convey on screen. A prime example is the clones. The EU addressed Kamino being shut down, the clones aging rapidly and dying out, and the Empire needing to recruit regular humans. But the only time we get any hint of that plot point in the films is in the origin story Solo. But if you went directly from episode 3 to episode 4, you would never ever second guess the fact that the stormtroopers are still clone troopers. This is a plot hole entirely created by George Lucas when he failed to show Kamino being destroyed at the end of episode 3. But even if he had shown that, he would still need to show the recruitment process and how the Empire phased out the clones. That process would have taken years to implement and left the fledgling Empire extremely weak to Rebel attack. It's not enough for the backstory to make sense if what we see on screen is confusing. And the sequel trilogy gave us so much confusing exposition and character development. How does Rey know there's no light left in Kylo Ren? How does Han go from this guy who never abandons his friends to this deadbeat dad who abandons his wife and son when they need him the most? How does Luke turn from the most optimistic guy in the galaxy into someone who runs away like a coward after his nephew murders a bunch of kids? The biggest issue many of us could never get past was that these characters were not the characters we knew. And from a story perspective, the exact same thing happened with Loki, and everyone missed it.
Kneel before me. I said.
This is Loki the Conqueror, not Loki the hero who helped his brother fight the Dark Elves, who had to bury his mother and father, who ended up willing to die for his brother. It took Loki 5 movies of character development for him to transform from cruel conqueror to lovable misfit. The filmmakers tried to play off a far too fast-paced change of heart by having Loki view his mother dying and seeing that he was the one responsible. There are multiple problems with this explanation for his personality shift, one being that Loki is extremely used to lying and being lied to. So why would he instantly believe this one video clip some random pothead-sounding kidnapper is showing him? And do you know why this was at all impactful for the audience? This scene only meant something to us because we had already seen this.
Now you see me, brother. Did she suffer?
We never got his immediate reaction to her death, so this scene fills in gaps for us, which makes us appreciate it, which makes us gloss over the fact that this scene also doesn't make sense because that's not him in the video, and that's not his mother. The story makes it a blatant point that variants are different, all have different personalities and different backgrounds. Every single variant we see has a different backstory because they made different decisions. This Loki is the one who got his mother killed. This Loki is a different person entirely. Or are they saying that this variant is completely abnormal from all other variants, and this one is a true copy of himself, while all other variants are separate versions? The script gives no clear answer, and I for one constantly felt off, because the Loki we were seeing was a variant of him.
You will all fall before me.
With the personality of him.
Odin's son.
And yet his character instantly accepted that he was the same person as his evil variant who got his mother killed. The filmmakers wanted to make a show about Loki the anti-hero, so they took Loki the Conqueror and stripped away the villain until only the jokester remained. Look at these two scenes. These scenes took place days apart from each other. Loki negotiated with a god, took down S.H.I.E.L.D., calmly gouged out a dude's eye, beat down the greatest soldier in history, manipulated, outplanned, outplayed absolutely everyone except the coolest woman ever. He took down S.H.I.E.L.D. again, scattered and demoralized his opposition, called in an alien army that nearly conquered the world, escaped right from under the nose of his enemies, and then that same conqueror that bowed to no man deigned to take a ticket and wait in line like a peasant. This character is wrong. This is exactly the same thing that happened with Luke. The filmmakers took two different versions of the character from two different periods of their life and tried squishing them together, hoping the audience wouldn't look too closely.
I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
Leave this island now!
I'll not leave you here. I've got to save you.
I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order.
I will not turn, and you'll be forced to kill me.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
It is the name of your true self you've only forgotten. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
I came to this island to die. Go away!
I can save him. I can turn him back to the good side. I have to try.
We needed to see this version of Luke and this version of Loki develop from the versions we knew. Otherwise, their personalities don't make sense to the audience. Filmmakers have figured out that if they throw the same actor into the same franchise, they don't have to worry as much about character development because the general audience won't look beyond the face. This show needed to feature the Loki who was still chaotic evil, and to have set up Sylvie as the one who helped transform him to an almost good guy in the same way that the past 5 movies transformed Loki the Conqueror. Remember what I covered in previous videos, the audience has to see a character change as part of the overall story, not off-screen between films or in some external comic book that we have to read to understand everything. For another prime example, did you know that Loki was confirmed to be mind-controlled throughout the entire first Avengers storyline? What? What evidence is there anywhere in these films that he was mind-controlled? Did he ever say it, ever break down in tears over all the people he murdered when he couldn't control himself? Did he show any of the seething self-hatred that Bucky displayed? No, because that didn't happen in the film. The filmmakers are blatantly reversing his character from someone who intentionally murdered because he is far more marketable when shown to be a lovable jokester. The theory suggests Loki wasn't really a villain at all, but a victim of the Mind Stone that was driving him to be eviler than he really was. Actually, it's pretty interesting. That entire article is dedicated to convincing its readers that Loki isn't really a bad guy. I wonder what the odds are that Disney pushed this narrative, even going so far as to rewrite his background in the wiki entry, because his character in the upcoming Disney Plus show would be a lot harder to believe if we firmly remembered who he really was. Looking back across everything we've seen, what are Loki's powers? He's strong, he's fast, he's tough, he can conjure objects. Now, that last one was actually something I learned while researching this video. I honestly thought all Loki could do was cast illusions. I thought he always had been holding this knife, and had just been making it invisible. But it turns out one of his powers is conjuring objects from one place to another. It also turns out, according to his official bio, that he can cast magical exploding energy blasts, like we see him do here on the train. And apparently, he can also use telekinesis and teleportation, as seen here, and here, and here. Now can anyone think of a time when those tricks would have been helpful? He never ever throws energy blasts, he never ever uses telekinesis, and he never ever teleports anywhere. You know why he is suddenly throwing around flashy new powers? Because it's entertaining and it's new. This is exactly what happened with Rey. You know why they made her levitate? It had nothing to do with the plot, it was because it looked cool, and I guess it also showed her progression with the Force. Although if she could lift 20 tons of rocks with ease, I'd assume that she could also float around like a fairy just as easily. But just like Loki, Rey never uses these abilities when they'd actually be helpful. She can fly, but has to jump around and risk falling to her death? She can float, but needs Finn to grab her instead of floating into the Falcon herself? She can levitate, but sinks into quicksand? Loki suddenly had brand new abilities with no explanation, and without himself or any character ever noticing, well, that's new. Remember how Palpatine didn't use Life Leech power here because the script demanded he wait? Or how Kylo healed Rey when the audience had no idea he was even aware of that technique? Or how did Rey learn the freeze move that Kylo always did? They learned these new skills and used them proficiently because the script demanded it. The MCU is walking down the same path of lazy writing that Star Wars has already paved. We are used to Marvel being the golden standard that we hold other films against, and our love has blinded us to the flaws. I thought Sylvie was moderately interesting. Actually, no, scratch that. I thought she was utterly one-dimensional and boring. She has no purpose in life, no personality, no dreams or desires, apart from bringing down the TVA. Think about it, what do you like about the character? Is it how she hates the TVA? Okay, what else do you like about her? Is it how she'd sacrifice anything to bring down the TVA? Cool, but what makes her so unique and memorable? Well, her relationship with Loki, of course. Aha, so she had no defining traits herself. We just like how she interacts with a character that we know is complex and interesting. Sylvie is interesting only because of her interaction with Loki. I could probably do an entire video exploring her poor character development, but let's focus on what bugged me even more: her powers. Kylo Ren can read minds. Read minds. And in a fairly advanced way compared with what we've seen in the other films. All Vader could pull from Luke was vague feelings and the word sister. All Palpatine could get from Anakin were vague feelings, but Kylo Ren was so skilled at mind reading that he confidently planned to pull precise galactic coordinates out of another person's brain. This advanced ability to read minds should have been a major subplot, but the script only wants to acknowledge that power when it's convenient. He doesn't read Lore's mind to find Luke. He doesn't read the minds of his top generals to find out who the traitor is. He spends forever trying to figure out where Rey is and never once tries to read her mind. So what, he could physically pull jewelry off her neck, but somehow isn't close enough to read her mind? Reading minds was one of the definitive abilities that he possessed, as demonstrated on multiple occasions. So why did he constantly forget that he had that power? Wait, why does that sound so familiar? Maybe I'm wrong, but I got the distinct impression that Sylvie decided to kill He Who Remains because she didn't believe him and thought he was lying.
I believe him.
You believe what? That a bazillion boogeymen are gonna turn up just because we give people free will? He's a liar, Loki.
So am I.
Disney did it again. They wrote the character of a mind reader who completely forgets they can read minds. Now, I already know an argument at least a few of you will make. The scene where they say we're a lot stronger than we thought we were. You'll say our Loki saw what the older Loki was capable of doing, making them believe in their own magical abilities so they got stronger and unlocked a new skill tree. But that reinforces the problem that I'm addressing. You can't just jump past character development. As a general rule, the audience has to see the character change, and that change generally needs to be slow, be progressive, it has to be earned. Rey didn't make sense to us because she started off too powerful. She started off too perfect. She needed to progress in a logical, predictable way that makes sense to the audience. But we got the opposite. We see she can heal, but she lets Poe run around with a gunshot wound. Laser gun wound? Laser wound? She lets Poe run around with a major boo-boo instead of healing him. We see that she can redirect lasers using the Force, yet she never remembers she has that power at any other time. We see she can effortlessly control sand, yet earlier she almost drowned in it. And as another comparison, one of the biggest arguments for Rey being a poorly developed character is the fact that the audience rarely knows what she wants. Does she want to be a Jedi and help people? Or is she just scared of the power and wants to learn to control it? Does she want a family or to go back and live alone on a desert planet that she had almost zero connection to? Or is she desperately searching for any father figure so she doesn't end up dancing for the power converters? Sylvie feels like a very similar character to me, with a very traumatic childhood, having to fend for herself, growing up in a horrible, dangerous environment, never having a family, never having a place she belonged, spending most of their lives with only the basic goal of survival, and both of them only having merit because of the other characters around them. Now, I'm going to lose several nerd points and say I had no idea who this character was before he popped up on this show. But I also think that gives more credibility to this analysis since I had nothing else to go off of. No backstory except the character exposition delivered to the audience in this single scene. And help me, Obi-Wan, I have no idea how to start trying to figure out what may be the most confusing character the MCU has ever debuted. Let's recap. This character is a regular human who, along with his variants, discovered multidimensional travel. Some variants were power-hungry and started a multidimensional war. This jerk used the evil Hurricane Doggy to end the war, kill all his variants, and is the sole remaining version of himself. He then established the TVA to prune all variants so that his evil selves could never again be born to wreak destruction on all existence. But how does any of that let him know the future? He says he's older than he looks, that he's lived 1,000,000 lifetimes. How? That cool metal shifting figurine thing he did? Technology, not a superpower. How has he lived 1,000,000 lifetimes? What context does this scene give to actually understand this character? He claims reincarnation as what will happen if they kill him. But what sense does that explanation make? If reincarnation was happening, then all his other variants were already reincarnated and already immediately pruned by the TVA, whose secret prime directive is to not let Kang rise to power again. And if reincarnation is a real thing, is it just his convenient plot device? Or are Natasha and Tony being reincarnated at the same time? Plus, if reincarnation is a thing in the MCU, it's a huge plot point of reincarnation that people born into a new life typically don't remember their past lives. So if he knows everything because he gets reincarnated every time he dies, how does his baby self retain that knowledge? Or is he reborn already potty trained and knowing his colors and algebra and how to run the multiverse? Or is he somehow reincarnated as a full-grown adult? The filmmakers willy-nilly introduced the concept of reincarnation without bothering to define it or to set any rules or boundaries. Does only Kang get reincarnated for some reason? Why him? We have to keep emphasizing he is a normal human.
You're just a man.
Flesh and blood.
Why can't Star-Lord's mom come back? Or will Cap get reincarnated after he dies? Or any of the 1,000 villains they've killed in these films, do they get reincarnated too? This show is reminding me exactly of how Lucasfilm Disney randomly introduced major plot points and force powers without the slightest idea of what rules will govern them. And because I'm not done tearing apart this very dangerous person, did he just type out these 2 exact pages to try to prove to them he can see the future? Or does he have to type it out in order for it to come true? Is it even him seeing the future, or does he have a secret fortune-telling typewriter printer hidden away? And just because I was sarcastically harping on the printed paper, if it is a magical book telling him the future, how does this written knowledge of the future tell him exactly what angle and speed they'll swing their swords when they try to kill him? Or if he's seeing the future in a vision, how could any normal human possibly remember it all with absolute perfection? Or can he only see the future when it applies directly to him? Or can he only see 30 seconds into the future? How far into the future is he actually seeing? Or is he seeing every single action from every living being across all of existence, and somehow remembering it all perfectly without needing brainiac levels of brain power? Disney constructed a crucial plot point and character trait, both of which make absolutely no sense unless taken at face value. And then we get to the magical, shocking moment where Kang passes the threshold into new territory, a place where he had no idea what's about to happen. Why? Why did he know everything that was going to happen right up to this point? Has he been reincarnated 1,000,000 times and every single thing happened exactly the same way every time, and he always dies right exactly at this point and then the universe resets itself? Why would his death reset everything? And speaking of him dying, why does killing him do anything? The TVA is still working to delete all variants, so why does this jerk dying change anything? The TVA wasn't around for the first multidimensional war. By creating the TVA, he should have prevented all future multidimensional wars as well. And side note, all he is doing is giving advanced technology to his TVA agents so they can jump around the multiverse. He isn't literally controlling the flow of time, only how the TVA influences the flow of time. This script has taken forever to write because I keep sitting here staring at the wall in confusion. I mean, just listen to this.
I know it all, and I've seen it all. Everything you guys did on Lamentus, I saw. All the stuff the TVA didn't know about, I knew.
He is able to watch them, hear everything they say, no matter where they are in time or space. He knows things the TVA doesn't know. Literally, the time police don't have as much power as this guy, even though we know exactly how they monitor time, exactly how they travel between dimensions. We know nothing about how this random dude is doing all this. Disney created a literally omniscient character, the only all-knowing character we've ever seen, except possibly the Ancient One. She trained in the mystic arts for literally hundreds of years to obtain this power. She isn't randomly all-knowing, she is a sorceress. This dude is literally just a dude. Even Ego, a literal god, wasn't as all-knowing as this random hobo who may just be a squatter in the worst housing district in existence. And then he tells them that every single thing that happened to them, he made happen.
Every step you took to get here, Lamentus, the Void, I paved the road.
Can you think of any single thing that happened to them in this series that was even possibly caused by this jerk? Loki got the cube by accident, was immediately picked up by the TVA because they monitor when a variant appears. Stoner Dude liked him and took him under his wing. Loki did Loki stuff. Everything that happened in this series was entirely predictable based on the visible actions of the known characters. Please prove me wrong, but I don't think there is a single iota of evidence that He Who Remains orchestrated anything. Okay, next point. Why are the only two options either for them to kill him or them to take over for him? Why can't they both destroy the TVA and let him live? That way they get rid of the corruption and don't risk all of his other variants mysteriously springing to life for no reason. Or how about Sylvie gets to kill him and the Lokis take over the TVA and get to work pruning all the variants before they can discover multidimensional travel and become a problem? Or better yet, if the entire purpose of the TVA is to stop the Kang variants, then why not just only kill the Kang variants and let every other variant timeline branch off and do whatever weird thing it wants to? Oh, and speaking of branching, did you notice how the filmmakers didn't even bother to try to explain this little bit of needlessly injected tension?
Maybe he was telling the truth.
Better hurry! Timeline's already branching.
So what is
He's not dead, the TVA are still in place. Why is the timeline branching right now? Does that mean all the other Kangs will return regardless of what decision the Lokis make? What was keeping the branches trimmed before? Did all of these time bombs that Sylvie sent off somehow cause this? And why do the timelines change? Dangerous Jerkface said all his variants discovered multidimensional travel at the same time. Ergo, every timeline was created at the same time and developed at the exact same pace. So why, when Loki travels back to the TVA, has time been rewritten with Kang as their god? And this one really gets me. All his variants discovered multidimensional travel at the exact same time. This means that every timeline was created at the same time and developed at the exact same pace, so even if the plot point was reincarnation of all variants once all variants die, they're each reincarnated in a different life than the one that originally caused them to research and discover multidimensional travel. And he distinctly says, if I'm reincarnated, I'll just end up back here anyway. In order for that to happen, he'd have to again harness the power of the Hurricane Doggy, kill all his variants, start a new TVA. All of that would have to happen in order for him to end up exactly back here in this spot. And for that to happen, the entire universe must be reset or the pieces won't be in order for any of it to happen again. Great Papa Palpatine, this storyline is infuriating. Lying Devil Villain has 4 important plot points. He knows everything. He has evil variants who destroy everything. He gets reincarnated, and if he dies, all his variants are reborn. And none of these plot points make sense within the context in which they are given. This character, as he was presented on film, is barely fleshed out, barely understood, and entirely confusing unless the audience members have previously maxed out their daily allotment of critical thinking. And just to address something we've discussed several times in our podcast episodes, consider how utterly unrealistic this setting is. Everything is completely covered in dust. He Who Remains is eating an apple and has a pitcher of tea and a fireplace and a chalkboard, and that's it. How does he live like this? It looks completely inhospitable and utterly boring. And this is just me brushing the surface over a couple days of analyzing this show. I'll bet there is so much more. Like, remember how Loki the Conqueror is so strong, he could easily take on Cap in a fight? He takes a punch and doesn't care. He hits Cap so hard that he goes flying, and yet this one out-of-shape random dude utterly dominated Loki in a fight. Where is the famed Marvel consistency? Or, remember how long they spent walking everywhere, when apparently both Lokis can teleport? Or how about Sylvie can suddenly now use magic plasma blasts and telekinesis too? The entire rest of the series, all we've seen her do is enchantment magic. Are we supposed to infer that she learned these new tricks simply from seeing Loki do them? Boy, that sounds familiar.
mocking me? Are you mocking me? Stop it, you just didn't do it again. He's trying to copy. No, you just stop
Enough!
doing it. He's doing it first.
Or what about Loki randomly inferring that he and Sylvie are more powerful than they thought just because this variant of Loki could create such an impressive illusion? Or what about the fact that he keeps talking about an infinite number of his evil variants? Is he really that morally corrupt of a person that not one variant is noble? Or is this person here the very best that he ever achieves? And at the end, when Sylvie opens the gateway and uses Expelliarmus to push Loki through, how did she already have the coordinates programmed in? Hobo Dude said he didn't know what happened after this, so there was nothing programmed into the temp pad at that point. And now this one really confuses me. He has spent 1,000,000 lifetimes searching for people who could replace him, and he settles on these two. No, he doesn't just settle, he found exactly who he needed.
I've gone through a lot of scenarios trying to find the right person to take this spot, and it turns out that person came into what is definitely you two.
Again, think back to everything that's happened in Season 1 and ask yourself, what did he see that made him think these two were fit to rule all of space and time? Was it the constant delusions of grandeur and desire for power that Loki harbored his entire life? Was it the seething hatred for the TVA that gave Sylvie the ability to properly administrate that same organization? Explore his reasons for trusting them with this position, and you'll see nothing worth believing in from her, and only the slightest twinge of possibility from him.
Your savior is here!
The entire plot point of them being the chosen ones is entirely contrived and absolutely begs you not to examine it too closely. This video ended up really bashing this show, and that's for a good reason. Because it was very entertaining and I liked it. Because when we enjoy something, we stop being critical of it, and we let little story problems slide, which lets the creators be lazier and lazier with each subsequent story.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
The Force Awakens got mostly rave reviews from fans. It wasn't until years later that more of us began to notice how poor a foundation The Force Awakens gave the sequel trilogy. But the thing is, it was bad all along. The basic story didn't magically change because of Episode 8. The basic story of The Force Awakens was a mansion of beautiful marble built on shifting sand. And we, the fans, were so enamored by the beauty of the mansion, we didn't care to examine how weak the foundation really was. This series has gotten great reviews from fans, as Marvel publicly pushes the mantra that they are working diligently to write a cohesive story that makes sense. Kevin Feige quoted as saying they had a meeting with everyone so they could nail down how the multiverse would work. Fans see this apparent dedication to quality and are very pleased that Marvel cares more about their product than Lucasfilm does. But I very easily wrote an 8-page script detailing all the problems I found just mostly in one episode. This story is very flawed, but good luck trying to get anyone to admit it. There is a very unfortunate phenomenon where we as media consumers are absolutely terrified of admitting that something we love is flawed. I've sat with friends and coworkers and tried to explain why a certain plot point or character arc doesn't make sense in a dozen different ways, but the only response I ever get is a stubborn, "Well, I liked it." This stubbornness stems from our own internalized sense of self-worth, from the fact that our brains instinctively, subconsciously ignore data that doesn't fit with our own deeply held beliefs. Our brains do everything in their power to preserve what we believe to be true, because admitting we are wrong is dangerous and scary, so we push back hard against any point of view that conflicts with what we believe. We don't have to be so terrified of acknowledging flaws, either in ourselves or in the films we love. This show was flawed. And if we don't show the creators that we're paying attention, that we're holding them to a higher standard than what they last gave us, then the next time they'll give us something even worse. They'll give us something haphazardly thrown together that's all flash and no substance. I enjoyed WandaVision, but it had faults. I enjoyed Falcon Winter Soldier, but I could make an hour-long video about the things they did wrong. Black Widow was fantastic, but it had some very nonsensical plot points, and it very poorly utilized some great villains. And I really enjoyed Loki, as laden with flaws as it was. And we shouldn't just forgive and forget those flaws. Marvel has been held to an incredibly high standard, and we, the audience, are the ones setting that standard. They will keep lowering the bar of quality to whatever we are willing to accept. Whatever the medium, via Twitter, via essays like this becoming popular, by making your voice heard, you can help maintain a high quality level for the media you consume. And remember what we can learn from this show and our reaction to it. We need to stop being so terrified of admitting that things aren't perfect. We need to think about the media we consume, analyze whether it actually has a good message behind it, or whether it's unsubstantial feel-good fluff. Marvel, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, practically everything DC, not to mention your real-life friends, family members, your spouse, everything and everyone you love is flawed. And it's time we rose above our fear so we can acknowledge those flaws and rise above them. If you enjoyed this video, I've got literally hundreds of ideas sketched out, but I need to be able to do this full time. Subscribe, share with your friends, check out my Patreon. My dream is to create content full time if I'm given the chance. Thanks for watching, my friends, and I'll see you next time.